Yeah.
Just a matter of time.
Oh man, I've been so down with my body before. Like,
Yeah.
I've had like 3 knee surgeries.
Oh really? Wow.
I've felt so grim, like limping everywhere I go, every step painful, like my kneecap. Like,
Yeah.
I've been so low, and it's like to get to where I'm at now and know that I'm not ignoring my body this time. Hello. How do humans? Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Rediscover Human Podcast. For those of you watching on YouTube, you might have noticed we're one man down. Chris is not with us today. It's his birthday. He's doing some optimized. I don't know what he's doing. He was in Glastonbury yesterday doing something, and he's in his world doing his thing today, and he's given us his blessing to do an episode without him. So today you've got me and Josh. What's up, Josh?
What's up?
Yeah, so today's episode, this is our most passionate thing right now. What'd you say?
Yeah, 100%. It's what we're into more than anything at the moment.
More than anything at the moment. It's that what we wake up thinking about, what we talk about every conversation.
Yeah, and especially from my perspective, it doesn't mean I know a hell of a lot about it, but I'm just exploring it like crazy.
Yeah, and you're learning fast, man. You're learning really fast, and I think you're seeing the evidence as well. So even though we're all still so new to it. So today's episode, we're going to talk about kind of the fitness industry, but rather than focus on what's wrong with the fitness industry, we'll talk about what the areas of the internet that we are scouring and that we've researched and put our time and invested into that we think are currently the leading edge and are going to steer us. Everything grows and evolves. Even when you think you've hit the pinnacle, there's a way for it to evolve, and there is huge room for growth in the fitness industry, but moreover in athletics and in sport and the way athletes train. There's so many athletes getting non-contact injuries these days, which is a massive sign, as me included. Something was wrong, right? Something's wrong in the way they're training, in the way they're moving. If they're getting non-contact injuries, which means it's an injury happened over time from overuse or overstress or a freak accident, the hamstring goes, your quad goes, your calf goes, shoulder injuries something is wrong. And so tracing that down, as me, someone who had, we were just discussing before, I've had 3 knee surgeries, all sorts of bad shoulders, spine issues that I never wanted to. I didn't need a label for my spine issues. I knew something was wrong, and I trusted that I could solve it without having to have a label on it. And just knowing every other human, I don't really know a human, really very rare humans that train that don't have a single niggle or an injury that is nagging them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's so common. And
I think as well, when you were saying then with sports, people are getting contact injuries, but on contact where they shouldn't be getting injuries, just because there's an imbalance going into, a hit or a tackle or whatever it is.
yeah, that's a great point.
So I think if you looked at it, and it would be really hard to quantify this, but there would be a very small number of injuries where it's like a purely just from that piece of contact, you know what I mean? There's normally some sort of underlying issue through an imbalance created through training.
Well, you come from a rugby background, and when I watch that, I think, how is there not so many injuries?
Yeah.
And people probably think the same when they see me do parkour. How is there not so many injuries? But it's learning. With parkour, it was learning how to control the fall. And with rugby, it's probably learning how to steer the tackle or whatever, right?
Yeah, well, there's a technique element to it for sure. But I think there's a hell of a lot of injuries in rugby.
Yeah.
Like I suppose you'd be surprised if you're not in it, but going up through like academy systems, especially when I was in Loughborough, you've got a rugby club of 150 kids, 150 guys. There was a lot of people injured. You'd go into the physio room on any given day, there'd be like 20, 30 blokes in there, banged
that
up.
makes sense. You've got guys piling on each other, but if there's a way to mitigate that or to make it less frequent, because and we may as well just jump into it for me, because the current trend, I'd say, of the last few years is mobility. Would you say? Like that's come on as the thing, and how we source that. Now, let's go to where it comes from. Someone has a bad shoulder, they've got low range of motion in the shoulder. Oh, you need more mobility in your shoulder, so you stretch it. Might cause more issues because you're stretching something against its will. You can strengthen it. You can do stability work, which might help, which probably is a good solution to some degree. But what trumps all of, what is the next wave, in my opinion, and what trumps it all is biomechanics. If you understand the true function of the shoulder and how it's designed to work in relation to, well, as I will say, and I'll say it again, locomotion being the primary function of the body, of the movement of the body.
By locomotion, you mean running?
By locomotion, I mean running, gait cycle. And the gait cycle should be in every physio's analysis. And then beyond, if you reverse locomotion, that's the pattern for running. If you reverse the pattern for throwing. So when we run, we have an underarm swing, and then you reverse it and you lift the shoulder up and it becomes a throwing motion. And we'll get into work method in a bit. The three main principles they talk about in the beginning of it are swinging, sticks and ropes, throwing, and locomotion being the overarching principle. And when you look at the shoulder in its as this is its motion that it's designed to do, is run and to throw, and then you look at that, you have to look at the whole system. Okay, what's the hip doing when I'm throwing? And this is what we're learning when we're swinging the kettlebells. Mm-hmm. We're learning how to sequence the whole body in motion. And if there's traumas or issues, injuries, stopping a line in the chain, if you look at the body as though there's like these, it's a chain of joints and muscles, but there's no individual muscles. It's like a sausage sack with these all connected sausage tubes in this muscle. And the more you can work that, and we'll go into this now, is most people train like Lego men. So the Lego man's arms move forward and they move backwards. They don't have a ball in a socket. We've got a ball in a socket, and we've got muscles that wrap around the bones. They don't just go from one joint to the next joint in a straight line. Most of the muscles wrap around, or they work in conjunction with other muscles to help the body to rotate. And the more we can, and this is a principle I got from Weck Method, and we see it in other places as well, the more you move with rotational intent, and you can look at something as simple as boxing. And when boxers, one of the first things you're taught is to rotate as you punch, because then you get maximum range out of the punch and you get maximum power, because you're going with the muscles of the body. And then you pull back, you reverse the rotation on the way back in. This is the way the body and the muscles are designed to work for optimum function. When we run, and you find that, and it's, first of all, you have to enter this, and this is how I've lived for the last 5 or 6 years, is I look at the world and things I'm interested in as though we don't already have the answers, or as though the answers might be on the fringe.
I think that's where a lot of these issues come with weightlifting, mm-hmm. because the people that got most into that movement were powerlifters, mm-hmm. Olympic lifters, mm-hmm. and bodybuilders. Mm-hmm. And they all worked out for powerlifter, right, how can I bench, squat and deadlift the most? And that's, like you said, Lego man movements. Yeah. With bodybuilding, it's the same thing. How can I isolate a muscle so I can maximize the hypertrophy, maximize the growth? Yeah. And then everyone else has turned up at the gym and go, oh, these guys must know what they're doing because they're the biggest and the strongest guys. And they're trying to imitate that. But unless you're trying to be a bodybuilder or you're trying to be a powerlifter, it makes way more sense to get in the gym and do movements in a functional way. And this is one of the things we've been playing around with. So, for example, the shoulder press, you know, if you're doing a barbell shoulder press and you're just pushing it up over your head, you know, that's in a straight line. But okay, actually, it would be more natural for you to pick up a dumbbell or a kettlebell and rotate the bell as you're pushing it into the air. Yes. That would be way more functional. You're not going to get injured that way. Yeah. But people don't do it because other people don't do it. Yeah. And I think that's a really good point that you're making, is starting to look at the gym with fresh eyes and go, right, okay, how can we lift weights in alignment with how the body should be moving? Yeah. Yeah. You can't look to the strongest guy in the gym for the answers. They will have results, but when you look at the consistency of injuries of humans, you have to then look at, you can only really look at the greatest athletes of all time, the greatest athletes who never had injuries, and then you could also look at patterns in children or in human civilizations that are uncivilized in our perspective, like tribesmen and stuff like that, who didn't have
grow with trainers and beds and sofas and things. So these are more closer to nature. But you look at someone like Michael Jordan, and he's shooting shots and he's saying, don't look at my legs, because he internally rotates. And that's seen as slightly feminine. But that's, to have internal rotation as an athlete is, you look at Usain Bolt when he sprints, his heels drive out with each step. How many people actually drive the heel out when they run? We don't. We collapse in. We're on the inside of our feet, most people.
Well, I think you've shown me something before where it was a clip of Michael Johnson, the old American sprinter, and he was explaining why everything Bolt was doing was wrong. Mm-hmm. And straight away, for someone who's completely, I'm not making any claims about knowing much about sprinting, but just the way my mind works, I'm like, well, if he's winning, how is he doing it the wrong way? Yeah. And maybe you can explain more around.
Absolutely. I think it's a good point to make, is that Johnson in that video says that the American sprinters, look how upright they are, look how straight their shoulders are, look at they swing their arms. Bolt's wasting this energy. He actually says he's wasting his energy with this side-to-side motion. Yeah. His head's moving side to side. Every step he takes, his head goes, if he's going on his left leg, his head moves over to his left foot. When he moves to his right foot, his head goes over his right foot. And if your head's directly over your foot and you push forwards, you're going to go in that direction. You're going to go forwards. And then if you move your head over your left foot and you push, you're going to go forwards. If your head sits in the middle between your feet and you're pushing, there's a wasted energy in a diagonal direction. How does a cyclist go up a steep hill?
Yeah, they're
swaying. The bike is swaying like a snake. The energy is going in a straight line up the hill, and they're going head over foot. When you see a CrossFitter on the aerodyne, you see their head going side to side.
Well, they're gaining momentum, right?
They're gaining momentum. The head's over the foot. They're stacking the weight over that leg, and they're driving straight down. If the head stays in the middle, they're wasting energy side to side. So in order for Bolt's heads to go over each foot, he then has to roll his shoulders so that they hardly ever sit in a line. They're on a figure of eight path, rolling up and down. And this is where Michael Johnson's saying he doesn't move right. If he would be faster, if he could learn to run like these. But like you said, if he's the fastest in the world, maybe there's a reason. And I wonder how deep that stuff goes. I wonder if there's certain athletes, someone coaches them and tells them to do this. If they just find it and they go, well, the coach tries to coach it out of them and they go, I don't like that coach. And they go, well, just keep doing it your way. I don't know which way it's come from, but he was the fastest in the world and he moves in alignment with work method principles. And so this is where we get to now is, okay, so we've established, if we're not looking to the current mainstream resources of physios and coaches, and that's not to say they've not got answers and things that can help in many respects, but I like the excitement of being on the fringe and then these coaches or people using slow motion footage, which is a new skill. We didn't have slow motion like 10, 15 years ago to analyze, to break down. Like we are all on the leading edge of this technology. So we can use slow motion footage to look at Bolt, the way he moves compared to the other athletes, and to break this down and to see him coiling in his motion and his shoulders going and his head going over his foot. So then, okay, so we established he's the fastest. He moves with this method. How do then we train this into everyday humans? That's the real, big question.
And by this method, you mean this figure eight pattern?
So we'll talk about work method a bit then, because from injuries from parkour, I was never too badly injured in parkour. Then I got into running, and I got injured running, and I thought, if I can solve my issues and be able to run injury free, then it came to me naturally that then I can do parkour even better than I've ever done it, because running is such a simple movement in our DNA that it highlights injuries more than anything else. Because with parkour, there's no you can jump or you can hang and swing, but there's no set path to really follow with it. With CrossFit, you can have bad knees or bad ankles and you can get around it, right? You can turn your feet out when you're squatting. Everyone's got all these little tweaks and niggles, and you can just continue to do your sport and ignore the issue or train around the issue and manage it. With running, there's no managing. Like,
well, it's so repetitive, right? You're doing the same thing over and over.
Exactly. And the repetitive nature of it highlights if you've got a disc out of line, if you've got the axles bent or anything like that, it highlights it. So that sent me, okay, why is these things highlighting in my running? Why are my ankles? Why are my calves? Why are my knees? Let me look at this. And so I come to that conclusion myself that running is kind of the cookie cutter for like a functional body. And that's not to say that all runners are functional, because there's so many runners that can't even squat functional. They've got tight hips and tight. So there are runners that you can run if you've grown up doing it. You can build a body around it and scrape through.
Yeah, I see runners all the time and they look absolutely fucked when they're running.
Yeah, but then at the epitome, at the top level, at the Bolt level, at David Rediscover, you know, even Bolt, they say he had scoliosis and stuff, so he was doing it through that. Had this realization, then a few years later, digging deep into biomechanics, what are the resources out there, coming across functional patterns, listening to what Naudi had to say, made a lot of sense. He's asking all the right questions. He's calling out some industries and some things wrong with certain things, like a lot of lifting, CrossFit, yoga, but he's still wrong on a lot of levels, or missing a lot of the points of a lot of things, or not. He's not done a yoga practice himself to truly understand like Ashtanga and the Uddiyana Bandhas and internal talk even within yoga. It goes to those levels. Anyway, follow that path, and I won't go too far into that. Got kicked out of functional patterns. What else is out there? WEC method. Went, trusted life's flows, ended up in, and I know I touched on this briefly, so I'll try and go through it into the practice. Ended up in San Diego to do WEC method. Hadn't done any research in it really. I'd watched a few videos on the internet one night and got excited and just knew that. I just trusted that I need to go out there to look at it. Went, did 3-day course. And I don't want to give away their whole course and their principles. That lots of it's online, but I want to pay full respects to where they're at. And I've got the book here for those watching the YouTube video. And I mentioned already, you've got the swinging sticks and ropes, throwing stones and locomotion, and they call that the functional trinity. And then they go into the WEC method foundation. This is the way we train movement. Rotational movement training, RMT, coiling core, and the pulse. Now, I've not done much pulsing yet. I've got some pulses alongside me here. Nope, they're in my bag somewhere. Oh, they're over there. Doesn't matter. We'll get them. I'll show them another time. Rotational movement training has really started to click with me recently, and it's when I've been playing with the kettlebell, you can just do a clean where you pull it from the floor to your shoulder. Now, when I do a clean, but I add a spin or a rotation to the bell, it feels a lot lighter, and that's because I'm using the muscles in a correct path. Now, there's a guy there, Chris Chamberlain, also Savage Protocols, who, I've said it before, I'll say it again, is for me the number one. The way he's training is the most I don't know, ahead of its game, and I think between him and Alex Canellis, they could make any athlete on the planet a better athlete with the knowledge they have about training, if you can understand it and grasp it. But it takes real implementation. This is 6 months after I've been to WEC method, and in the last 2 weeks to a month, things have started to really click, and that's really with the help of training with Josh, teaching Josh some of the principles and seeing him. That's helped me to get it as well, along with the strong fit stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit, his internal and external stuff. So rotational movement training is where you start to use rotational movements with the body to make things lighter or feel lighter, because you're using it in alignment with the way the muscles are wrapped around bones rather than end to end. Then the biggest key of the foundation is coiling core, where you sink your shoulder. What happens with Lego Man training is you train both sides at the same time very well, very strong, but you hardly ever train the end range of your motion. Now, your shoulder can get quite close to your hip. If you try right now to get your shoulder to your hip, your left shoulder down to your left hip, you can get very deep on that side. You can do the same on the right. We very rarely train strength in these positions. And then to turn that into, what WEC method does is they go from 2D training, they make it 3D. Not only is your shoulder going down to your hip, but your shoulder's driving backwards and your hips driving forwards. And they call this the coil. So you're starting to, around the 9th rib, you're creating this sort of spiraling motion, setting torque, tension, and you're getting the end range on that side to then explode from, or you're able to find this position or close to it. If you're strengthening the end range, then the positions beyond that by proxy become more stable. So the rope being one of the gateways in, it teaches you this figure eight path that you can then find. You compare it with the Recoil, this sinking the shoulder back and down, which is, if you imagine like a Muay Thai kick or someone in martial arts, which again, martial arts is the real expression of functionality, because you're exploding body parts from snapping from a one end range to another to create maximum power through the thing. So applying this to running, then you're finding this coil on each side of your leg drives. You're moving in a figure eight path. What happens when you move in a figure eight path is then you don't have an end to the motion. You can just flow the energy from one side to the other side with rotation to help it be smooth. You can jump from your left leg to your right leg and move forwards, but to make it smooth, you have to then curve the edges, and that's where you figure of eight it. So you're coming back, you're going forward. And the coil is what helps you to do this with the rotational movement training. So what we're really connecting the dots with now, which I've been teaching Josh and learning deeper for myself, is to connecting rotational movement training, which is horizontal rotation, so kind of spinning rotation. As I said, with the kettlebell, I pull it up and I spin it, horizontally rotate it. With the coiling core, with the ropes, the figure eight path, it all starts to tie together. But until I'd practiced it, it's one thing to have the concept and I trust the process, but it's teaching the body that there's places in space like ley lines that you can find that are positions of athletic dominance that you can get to, that because we've trained 2D for so long, the body's built up the fascias become stiff and blocked to hold us into the 2D movements. When you start to move in 3D, then it starts to release the fascia and the body starts to become more athletic. And what we're discovering, hopefully going to prove, is that you can move more like a big cat. Like you can not only be strong and you can not only be, because people are strong and some people are springy and light, but to have both is the ultimate goal for the expression of human athleticism. And there are those peak athletes that made it through, and it's a rare thing. And we're figuring out the combination, which I think, as I said before, Savage Protocols is at the leading edge of this. The combination of WEC method training, which goes much deeper than I've just expressed here, but we'll save that for later, another time, with strongman training, is the real formula, which we're going to go, we're excited every day to go deep into.
Exploring, yeah.
I'll just caveat, I'll just set up the strongman, but I'd like you to go into your experience with that.
Yeah.
Can I just say, it clicked for me when and it's always a simple truth, these guys are lifting heavier weights than anyone else on the planet, like other than like a power lifter that's got the world record. But in terms of functional lifting, they're lifting something that humans can get their head that's been around with us. It's not a weird invented bar. It's like, these are the strongest men on the planet, the strongest men. Yeah. They know a thing or two about how to use the body, how to leverage. And some of them, again, might have fallen into good biomechanics. And I was watching strongman video yesterday, and the commentator was talking about Thor, and he said he's got really good biomechanics. And I've never really even heard that word on TV much. And he said it about the strongman, and I thought that is exactly why I'm here. So they're saying it in the commentary. I'm coming to this understanding of it as well. And then you're training that way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with that, with the whole strongman situation, it's like I was saying to you earlier, growing up playing rugby, you always had these kids, you played rugby with these kids and they just be freakishly strong, and they just call them, farm boys, like boys that grew up on the farm, and they were just like way stronger from, than all the other lads from like an early age, from like 14, 15. And they just had this like freakish strength. And then I just never thought about it, I just accepted it and never put any real thought into it. And then when we started playing around with these strong man movements, like sandbag carries, farmers walks, we haven't been able to play around with the yoke yet, but that sort of stuff.
Ooh, we want to play around with the yoke, don't we?
If anyone's got a yoke going spare, let us know. And then you start realizing, fuck, like I understand why these guys are so strong, because you're working all these other little bits and pieces, and you'll finish a strongman session, say where you've been squatting with the sandbag. And, I've done barbell training for years, and I don't really get DOMs in my legs anymore from barbell training unless I like completely switch up the rep range or whatever. Finish training with the sandbag for the first time, like there's loads of muscles that I didn't even realize I had are hurting here. And
Which were muscles?
so,
Internal?
yeah, your internal muscles. So,
Yep.
like the internal obliques, the lower part of your lat,
Yeah.
and stuff. And also, when we were doing another exercise that I forgot to mention with rope pulls, and you're doing the rope pull, and previously I'd always done that. Whenever I'd done anything like that previously, I'd always considered it as an external movement, like pulling with your back. And then when you start watching StrongFit's video and explaining how you should do these stuff and you should be in internal rotation the whole time, you finish a rope pull and your chest is on fire, your biceps are on fire. And like, okay, right, this is something completely new.
Yeah.
But you can see, you can really start to understand why those guys growing up were so much stronger, because they've been doing all this. Been working not only the external muscles,
More
that you
natural
get,
objects and more natural movements than weights in the gym.
and it kind of ties into what Paul Check talks about with primal pattern movements. You're working these natural movements that are found in nature that human beings would have done for the entire of our existence. You know, walking, lifting heavy shit.
And the heavy stuff, this is one thing that really helped me. I've had this inner ankle injury for years now, and it's been one of the last things I've had to solve.
Yeah.
And when you got on the sandbags, I did one session doing sandbag squats with you, and they felt stronger the next day. And I was like, oh my God. And then I seen a StrongFit video, and he said, when you put the weight on a barbell, the weight's outside your center line, it's outside your body, outside your shoulders. That's naturally the weight's outside. When you lift it, it's pulling you into these external positions, or I guess, because if people are new to it, just saying external and internal can be quite confusing. But external is kind of like an open, your hips are open, your feet are splayed out, and your shoulders are open. And so it's putting all the weight onto the external. Now, when I put the weight inside my shoulders, which is much more natural, and I'm wrapped around it with my hands, there's not a muscle that's not working, and I'm squatting. StrongFit said it, and I felt it when I started doing it. Your internal, the insides of your leg muscles, when you're squatting, have to fire, have to work to stay balanced. They don't have to work with the barbell. And so if you've already got imbalances, it just gets worse and worse. So after one session, I knew it had done a lot for me. And then having done a few more sessions since, when you do something right, you do know within a matter of days, I think, with almost everything, with diet, with training. And that was the instance, I was like, the next day, I knew.
Yeah, as soon as we started doing it, it made perfect sense.
Yeah.
And I think to explain that internal, external concept a little bit more, you can use the squat.
Yeah.
So if you do a squat, a lot of lifters, you'll be told to screw your feet out into the floor.
Yeah.
And by screwing the feet out into the floor, you engage that external torque chain, as StrongFit says. Whereas with the sandbag,
Glutes outside of the legs.
yeah, so it's basically the outside. It's all the power muscles. It's like your lumbar spine, the outside of your legs, and then your upper back, effectively. Whereas if you do the sandbag, you're holding it in the center. You've engaged your chest, the inside head of the inside head of the bicep, the inside head of the hammy, and it's like the inside of the body as opposed to the outside of the body. And when you do a squat, like a normal barbell squat, you need to engage that inner core on the way down. And a lot of people never train that. The only way they train it is from doing the eccentric phase of the squat. But then they work all these pressing movements to assist their squat, but all they're working is to improve the up portion. Whereas if you can increase your stability on the way down, and you can really control that squat on the way down by being able to engage your internal torque chain, that's going to give you so much more power. And you also you like load up like a spring on the way down, and then you can fire out of the hole using the external torque chain. It's really interesting.
Wow. It really blew my mind. And he says there's not, to look at the body not as though there's individual muscles, to look at it as though there's two systems, literally, internal and external. And there's a really good I think if you search StrongFit internal torque, or you'll see it. He's on Google Images. He's done a human body with some of it's colored, muscles are colored in red or they're colored in yellow, and one of them is to do with internal, one's to do with external torque. And it was just amazing the overlap with Work Method, where they talk about rotational intent. So, and that's what he says when he says torque. So you're not necessarily actually rotating, but you're firing the muscles as though it's kind of like a spiral or a coil going around when you push. And it's in yoga, in down dog, you're supposed to have and when you do press ups, I guess not properly, but when Marines do press ups, their elbows are by their sides, so your elbows are coming in. And when I see a basketballer throw a shot, their elbows lined up with the net, their elbows not splayed out. And this is where Strongfit says, like, you're in your parasympathetic state, which is your more accurate and precise, and the dart throwers elbows in, they're in this internal phase, and the external is the explosive and the one powerful movement. And so combining that is so game changer.
What the way I understand torque is you're applying pressure, but then you're applying rotational pressure. So with that, like that idea of the concept with the squat is when you're doing a barbell back squat, you're pushing your feet into the floor and you're rotating them out at the same time, although they're not moving.
That's what they say, rotational. They call it rotational intent. Strongfit calls it torque.
Okay.
Yeah. So rotational intent, exactly.
It's the same as internal external.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it doesn't necessarily mean there's movement, but it's the intention, isn't it?
Yeah.
Within the body, that then it helps the body to anchor, to utilize. And it was Chris Chamberlain that said it to me as simply as it can be said. And it took a few weeks before it kicked in, but you want to take the slack out of the system. If you move the body as though you're just straightening the arm, there's slack to be had there. When you put rotational intent, you're ringing. To wring water out of a towel, you have to rotate it. You can't just squeeze it. So you're wringing the muscle. So to utilize the muscle, you take all the slack out of it, like you're doing with the towel to wring it. You're taking the slack out by winding it around itself, like a rope around itself. So that's what happens when you have put rotational intent into anything. You're taking all the slack out of the system so that it can work end to end. And it's when there's slack in the system in movements that the fascia becomes tight to protect the joints. Because it's like, you're not using me right. Okay, so we better protect him so that it doesn't go flying off or rip my arm out. So then I'll make the fascia tight out. It's a protection mechanism. And just foam rolling it or rolling on a lacrosse ball when you're completely passive, it just doesn't work like for what we want. You can get temporary fixes, and it may help to get the odd deep knot out, but overall, it's not the solution. Learning how to use the body correctly, programming that pattern back, it's in our DNA, so it's using tools to program it back and trusting the process, the time. And for me, the rope is the ultimate starting point, right? Yeah. How do you think that's something to that?
So I think with the rope, for me, it's really helped in terms of, so one of the concepts that Strongfit always talks about, and it keeps cropping up again and again, is the internal obliques and being able to fire those. And it seems like
which is where, just next to your six pack.
Yeah, it's like the outer side of your ab.
Yeah,
and your aim is to like push that outwards.
Yeah, and when you're holding a sandbag, you feel that switch on.
Yeah, you've got to engage.
It talks your pelvis naturally because of the size of the sandbag. And that turns them on, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And then by turning them on, your just whole internal torque change becomes stronger.
It does.
And you're able to do more.
Yeah.
And that is something that me personally, and I think a lot of people have a problem activating that muscle, because a lot of people are just sat at a desk all day. And if you're in that sort of slouch desk position, that is off, completely off. Yeah. So
that's your middle point. That's if you're trying to engage the system from head to toe. Yeah. And the middle switched off, there's slack right there, and you're going to have ankle issues and wrist issues and all sorts.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I think with the rope, from doing the underhand rope and just swinging that in the figure eight side to side, you can really feel your internal obliques turn on. Yeah. And then once you understand what that feels like and what good is from using the rope, then you go, okay, I'll look and I'll try and find this in other exercises. And next, then you go into a session where you're doing like sandbag carries and you can turn that on, your internal obliques on the same way as when you're training with the rope. And then all of a sudden you can carry the sandbag further. Sure. So there's definitely something to it, 100%. And like you said, it's just taking the slack out of the system and bringing it back a little bit further to what you were saying about how moving with rotational intent, and that's sort of how our muscles wrap around our bones. You see it with animals in the wild. If you see like a lion, hunting its prey, it'll be moving from internal to internal to external as it's like hunting.
Yeah.
And it's doing that, naturally, but because it's doing that, it's always ready to explode at any second. It can just pounce.
Yes,
And
exactly. It's always on the figure of 8 path, which means it can always accelerate on the figure of 8 path.
Yeah.
So it's always in balance.
And once you start training this into yourself, you feel like that.
Yeah.
Like I've never training my whole life, barbell training, playing rugby, everything. I've always had to warm up. Otherwise, I'm going to get a little niggle or whatever training. Now, from changing our training to doing this, I can just go for a run. I can just pick up the 32 kilo kettlebell and snatch it. Like, I just feel good all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's 100% something to it. I'm feeling way more functional.
And, which is such a good point, it's so true. We never really warm up anymore, do we?
No.
It's just not natural. We'll do something, we don't go crazy, but we'll just start moving. And I never feel like I've got to ease out of something. I just listen to my body. On the flip side of that, I never feel as burnt out. I never feel like I've overworked. You're not isolating muscles, are we?
No.
We're not. No. Like, we're playing a little bit with like the calf we're doing activations, but we're not purely going just bicep today and then the next day your biceps hanging off, or you can't sit on the toilet seat because your glutes are dead.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're able to train more frequently, less warm up, make progress, feel more functional, which is the ultimate goal, right? Like,
feel like there's been no danger of injury with anything so far.
Yeah.
And that ultimately, that's, for the average person, like how many people are going to the gym and they want to be, they're training to be a professional bodybuilder or powerlifter. Most people are going to the gym to, get the dope, get the feel good, the serotonin release from working out, and just, to feel good about themselves and get a good workout in. Well, if you're going to do that, surely you want to do something which is functional, so it's going to help you in everyday life. Do something which you're not going to get injured doing. Do something which is enjoyable. And this ticks that box, or all those boxes, way more than any of the barbell lifting that I've done.
Yeah, man, it's exciting times for us, and it's only early, but we want to help other people get to trying it. On the point you said about strong fit and to tie in with the animals, he says internal and to external. He calls it an arc.
Mm-hmm. So
he says it's an arc from internal to external, and I think what is also an arc, but to make it more 3D, is it. And I would love to have a conversation with him about it. I think it's the figure of 8. So he's saying it's like you go from internal to external, like that. It's an arc. I get that, but the figure of 8 is what completes it. Some people that might click for some people. And like we said, when a tiger moves or an animal moves, its tail, or cheetah moves, its tail is constantly rebalancing, like a squirrel. They have a tail to. It's a blessing to them because that keeps them constantly in balance. Wherever as long as they can control the tail, whichever side of the body their weight is on, they can use that to recalibrate. Now, we don't have a tail, but Wet calls our fingers our cheetah tails. Mm-hmm. Now, we mostly just use a thumb and forefinger. We don't really use the others, but they're there and there's a purpose. So when he's moving, and you can see it in some of the top NFL players, their fingers have got intention in them. They've got this kind of almost like dart-like grip, which they teach in work method. And then they use the pulse, which I'm just starting to train more now, because that's one of the third principle that I've not gone deep into of work method, is using connective tissue recoil. So you shoot your hands down with gravity, your fingers are engaged, so they're not slack, because you're not going to get any rebound off that. You engage the fingers and then you pulse. And you can use the connective tissue recoil all the way down to your ankle to rebound, to move. Now, I can't say this is exactly I only like to speak on things from full experience, but I had a good session yesterday with the pulsers, doing some sprints after coaching a rugby player. I joined him for his, what do you call it when you hit the line, touch the line, run back, shuttle runs. Yeah, shuttle. And I was using the pulsers, and it just felt like I was floating a lot more than normal with the pulsers. And I will save that as I've just ordered the new ones from Wet Method, because I've got the older pulsers and the new ones are supposed to be faster. And I did play with them a little bit when I was there, but the rope works, the coil works, the rotational movement works. The kettlebell feels lighter when I apply rotational movement. Mm-hmm. So why am I not going to trust that the pulses are going to do something when I'm playing with them? So I'll speak on it after I've done more practice with them. But honestly, if you want to, the formula's there, guys, for anyone to try to go in. Wet Method, strongman training, but you look at strong fit as the sort of leading light on the principles with that.
I think that what StrongFit has really pointed out was that this idea of the internal torque chain, and a lot of people are going to the gym and then and training the external torque chain without knowing they're training it. Just going into doing classic barbell lifts. But by training the internal torque chain, you're giving your body this stability, and it's just going to improve everything. You're working on all those little muscles.
He's the pyramid.
Yeah, he's got the concept of the pyramid.
And you were telling me the other day how you would only ever train skill. So you want to go into that?
Yeah, so
it's like the 3S pyramid.
Yeah, so it's structure.
Structure's on the bottom of the pyramid. So this is in order of hierarchy of like what you need first is structure.
Yeah.
Then stability, and then skill. And you were explaining to me that you were doing powerlifting. Was it deadlifting or what were you doing?
Yeah, so I was going for powerlifting numbers, so bench press, deadlift, and squat.
Yeah.
And if you just look at how linear progression works when you're training, you start off with high rep stuff. So you build this like a foundation of muscle, and the idea is you hypertrophy your muscles, so you get your muscles as big as possible, so they've got the greatest strength potential. Okay. And then once they've got this strength potential, then you start decreasing the number of reps you're doing, but increasing the number of sets. So now you're making this bigger muscle strong.
Simmons, we were talking about Louis Simmons.
Yeah, we're talking about Louis. So
that's conjugate.
No, that is linear periodization.
Oh, linear periodization. Yeah.
And then basically Louis Simmons came in, who's the owner of Westside Barbell in America and probably one of the most famous strength coaches of all time. He looked at that linear progression method and just said, it doesn't make any fucking sense. And then he created his own system, which was the conjugate methods, which I don't know a huge amount about, but I can sort of give a summary of what it is. So you follow that same linear progression in terms of the closer to competition you get, in terms of the competition being the day you're going for your 1 rep maxes, you start decreasing the number of reps and increasing the number of sets to hone the skill of lifting heavy weight. Because there's a difference. If you're going to the gym every week and you're doing 5 sets of 5, there's a big difference between that and going in and doing sets of 2. Because when you're doing sets of 2, you're very close to what your 1 rep max would be. You're like 95% of what your 1 rep is, and that's a different weight. Especially when you're getting into heavy lifting and you're squatting over 200 kilos and stuff like that. It's fucking scary putting 200 kilos on your back, weighing 90 kilos because you think this could fucking crush me. So it's a completely different skill training that as opposed to doing 5 sets of 5 at 160 or whatever. So the conjugate basically it follows that same progression in terms of the closer you get to competition, you start training the skill more by doing low reps but a high amount of sets. You might go in and do 10 sets of 2, whereas at the beginning you might have been going in and doing 4 sets of 15, something like that. See what I'm saying? Yeah. So you start training the skill of being able to lift heavy weight. But with the normal linear progression system is, as you progress, you stop doing these high reps, and you become completely deconditioned by the time you hit competition, because you're not training your muscles to be big anymore. So what Louis did was he started training that skill, but he would also keep in that level of base conditioning, so he'd keep his guys big basically by bringing in assistant lifts and stuff like that. So assistance exercises and doing them high rep.
He was doing speed training, so they do really fast reps, lightweight, massive weights, and then he'd just do like average weights and just sets and sets and sets, right? I think that was the kind of training them 3 together over periodization and
exactly.
To get really strong. Then he brought in chains, then he brought in resistance bands, and it's a very interesting documentary, West Side versus the World. I'd say watch that. But back to StrongFit, he has this pyramid, which Louis was probably naturally applying when he was doing the assistance work and whatever, is you need structure first, then stability. How are that? Do you understand how those two are different? I'm not quite fully with him on that. Like, I listened to him explain it, but...
So... one of them, either structure or the stability, is covered off by the strong, like doing all the strongman lifts.
Like you can't lift a heavy sandbag and walk with it without all your structure being in place naturally. It starts to it makes you breathe a certain way. The yokes. What are the main ones then? It's like yoke overhead press.
So he in one of their latest podcasts, the one on that, he talks about being able to do. He puts in a few sort of like tests to see if you've got the correct structure, and it's being able to sandbag carry your half of what your deadlift is for 50 meters. And he said that isn't an excuse for having a shit deadlift.
Yeah, but on the flip side, it means that I can get my deadlift up a lot more.
Yeah, well, so you carried 100 kilos for 30 something meters the other
something
day.
like that.
And that was your first attempt at like a big walk.
100 kilo sandbag carry, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But my deadlift, when I did CrossFit for like 6 months, and it was at like 150, I think.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, you could lift a lot more than that.
I should be able to get to 200, right? Like,
Yeah.
But we're so excited because I never really lifted much weights. I'd feel it out. I did the CrossFit. I'd get niggles and injuries. I'd occasionally feel it out. You gave me a program and I'd feel it out then. And I'd still feel my body was telling me not to lift these heavy weights. We've done so much structure work, kettlebell work. It'd be so interesting to go back when the time is right for us to.
And we were talking about this earlier. So a friend of ours, Dominic Rapson, he is a calisthenics coach, and he lifted 200. He did a 250 kilo deadlift at 80. I think he was like low 82 kilos, something like that. So it's 8, 16, 24. So it's over 3 times body weight.
So that's over a 500 pound deadlift.
Yeah, which is crazy. And at the time I was thinking like, how has he done that? And it's because through him training Cali, he's got amazing structure. So he's got the ability, this is what I believe it to be, he's got this incredible ability to just recruit all of his muscles.
Yes, take all the slack out, use everything that's there.
Take every bit of slack out of the system.
Yeah.
And knows how to engage absolutely everything he's got to be able to lift that bar off the floor. Yeah. And I think that's the difference with a lot of other people when they don't train the internal torque chain and they don't do all this stability stuff.
Yeah, he does the dragon's pistol squats.
He does, yeah, dragon
which
squats.
Really like an internal expression of internal strength, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So he would be lifting that deadlifting, he would be engaging his obliques, engaging the inside of the hammies, and like you said, taking all the slack out of the system, which gives him the ability to lift that weight. Whereas you get bigger guys that wouldn't be able to do that, and it's because they're not activating their internal torque chain at all while they're trying to do the lift.
And I think on that, this is where functional patterns really is missing a big point. And if Naudi truly was the humble person he says he is, which I don't think anyone on the outside thinks he does, and he says, people need to admit when they're wrong, he should be embracing the rope from WEC method, because he must be able to see what that does, and he'd be embracing WEC steps, which is this wooden plank shaped at a certain angle, which WEC method use and go to use. And it basically stops you, if you've got bad ankle biomechanics, the WEC step stops that being a factor in how you use your legs. So you can do deadlifts and squats, and it takes out the ankle biomechanics, which would affect everything upstream. If your ankle's collapsed in, and then you're trying to engage internal torque chain and these things, it's going to have an effect on how well you're able to recruit. Whereas the WEC step takes out the ankle biomechanics and allows you to just work on the recruitment, so you can fix everything upstream, and then hopefully in time the ankle becomes stronger because of that.
Do they work in a similar way to the BOSU?
Yes.
In terms of you're gripping the ball, so you're having to engage that whole internal chain?
They work in a similar way that your foot can find the angle that it's meant to be at.
Okay.
But in terms of, you can get more internal grip on the BOSU, whereas you're not really necessarily supposed to pull in on them, even though you probably should be anyway.
Yeah.
But I think that is fascinating. And so Dom, you said deadlift like 250 at like 80 kilos, which is insane. And that for me brings me to a very important part, that possibly the most important part of this conversation is, we can have this and we can enjoy our training and we can have fun and we can think that we've got the answer. We've got to prove it.
Yeah, for sure.
We've got to prove it, right? So big cat training, if there is a way to be strong and to be, I guess, supple leopard, to use Kelly Starrett's phrase, to be a supple leopard, to not only be a big strong guy, but to also be mobile and functional, agile. There we go. Agile and strong is a rare combo. we think we've got the formula between wet method and strong fit. We think we're not the first ones to come across it, but we're on the leading edge of a few groups of people around the world doing it, and we're applying it to ourselves. We're training our friends. What would be a test? And I've got an idea, and I've discussed with you before, if you remember. Yeah. Taken from Greg Glassman, the CrossFit founder of CrossFit, I think. He says he wants people that can do 500-pound deadlifts and how many minute miles? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
5-minute mile.
Okay.
So he says CrossFit is a test of real, like, the functionality, because they've got heart and they've got capacity, CrossFitters have. And they're big guys. And if you can run a 5-minute mile at that size, that is very impressive. So he says he wants people that can do a 500-pound deadlift and a 5-minute mile. That is a great test of, like, big and strong, but also agile.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's complete. I think you need at least 3 things to complete a structure of anything, to make it balanced, to make a pyramid, to triangulate the truth. So the third thing I added to that, because I think those two are great as they are, and I discussed this with Harvey, we came up with it together, is a marathon.
Yeah. Okay.
Is to be able to run a marathon, and the time I said was 3:30, I think. And this is all open to change. People could send me ideas, but a 5-minute mile, a 500-pound deadlift, and a 3:30 marathon would be. And then you added something else, because you said you've got what, speed?
Well, I think the way you could look at it, right, is speed and power, strength, so aerobic and anaerobic.
So strength,
stuff.
The deadlift.
So you could have strength. I think there could be 2 tests of strength. So you could have, like, the classic barbell lift, so bench press, a shoulder press,
the 3
a
ones.
deadlift.
Okay, yeah, you could set a number on that, right?
Yeah, you could set a number across all of those, like in relation to your body weight, or just, it could be any one of those in terms of that's a representation of static strength.
I think all 3 in relation to body weight would be good.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how much crossover there's from bench press to functional movement, whereas I think deadlift probably is.
Yeah, and maybe more shoulder press would be a bit more functional if you were looking at it that way. Yeah. An overhead shoulder press. Okay. And then I think another representation of strength is a carry. So doing something where you're doing either a sandbag carry or a yoke carry or something like that, or again, you
farmer's
could pick or a farmer's carry.
Which is a cross of deadlift and walking, right? So you could do the farmer's carry should be your deadlift.
And then you've got some sort of endurance. So like you said, you could have a shorter thing, so a 5-minute mile or a marathon. Yeah. And then power. Yeah. So you could have like a throw.
I think that, just to go back to that, because I think they're 2 very different expressions. But maybe it needs to be more like a 400 meter, like a 60-second 400 meters. Maybe a mile and a marathon are too similar, even though they're very different things. Maybe it is 400 meters in a marathon, or like 2 because because we established, in my belief anyway, and a lot of people, that locomotion is the epitome of functional. I like having 2 tests of that, a sprint version and an endurance version. Yeah. So we'll get back to that. So 2 tests of that.
And then I think power, power in terms of like a throw or a kettlebell snatch or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Like explosive power.
I like, so you could do like kettlebell throw overhead or something like that.
Yeah, literally. And with this, going back to the strength, maybe if you were doing barbell movements, it could be a 5 rep instead of a 1 rep as a display of strength. If you're looking at a power movement, that's going to be a 1 rep, as explosive as possible. Test of strength could
like
be
a snatch, right? Or
more like, I'd be thinking more like a shoulder press or a squat. Over a 5 rep as opposed to a 1 rep.
And that would make it power, not strength.
No, that would make it strength, not power.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Power's 1 rep. Strength
power's the 1 rep. Yeah.
Is more repping out. Okay. Cool. Well, hopefully that's something for, like, people might have ideas and they can send us suggestions.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think we'd love to come up with a test of this big cat training. Yeah. Man, I've enjoyed this one.
Yeah, it's been good.
We're very passionate on this, and I think we can.
It's interesting because it's the first. We're experiencing this right now, so this has been so much more of a conversation in terms of we're exploring this during this podcast, as opposed to other podcasts where they're preconceived ideas and stuff. We're talking about. So it's cool to explore. It's
great. Yeah, we're in very much in the process, and it literally feels like we're 1 or 2 months into it. like truly, but it took months to get to this place where we're actually exploring it like we are.
Yeah.
But the summer's come in. I don't know whether what I text you the other day, I was like, we don't need a drag or a push. We've got
Gonna pull the car.
we got the car. Why not do that?
We should 100% do that.
Yeah, we just started doing car pushes and then started thinking about the internal with the push, letting the heels stick out, and then we could tie. I'm sure there must be a thing for me to tie a rope to.
Yeah, well, we buy a harness and then we can just harness us out, drag the car.
We've got plenty of rope as it is.
Pull the car.
I'm the rope guy at the moment, apparently. So I just want to send people to the resources that we've kind of used, and we've said it enough. I'm sure you're intelligent enough to find it yourself, but I'd say check WEC Method on Instagram, check them on YouTube. They've got videos that are 3 or 4 years old. I got friends that message me every week. They're like, I've just been watching that WEX guy and I've been doing the rope and it makes a lot more sense now. And they're looking at his videos from 3, 4, 5 years ago of him talking about the coiling. So this WEC Methods YouTube, if you're wanting to go further, the videos are all quite old, but they've just got 10,000 views, and I just think there's so much potential there. And if you're rolling a rope already, you need to start to adapt it into other stuff, and that will help you start to adapt it transition from the rope, the patterns of the rope into the athletic movements. So definitely WEC Method YouTube. As I say before, Savage Protocols on Instagram. Go over his kettlebell stuff, his training, his Bosu training, his just the way he trains at home in his home gym. He's on some really cool stuff there. So those are, and then StrongFit 1 on Instagram or StrongFit on YouTube.
Yeah, they've got a wealth of free videos on YouTube, and they've also got their private members section on YouTube as well, where they've got a load of stuff.
They're doing assessments and stuff.
In terms of other sort of strongman accounts that are good to follow is Strong Camps. Does some really cool exercises. And then specific to the UK, there's a jiu-jitsu guy called Dan Strauss, the Raspberry Apes, his handle, and he does some really cool stuff as well.
Grip strength and stuff.
Yeah.
And on, I guess the kettlebells it was Pavel that watching him talk about it, and he said the fastest way to get strong is to strengthen your grip and strengthen your stomach. And those are the two things. So I thought that was very interesting from him, and I have noticed the what the heck effect with the kettlebells, swinging them. We're going to leave that to Chris because he's done kettlebells for longer than us to go in. But I've noticed just from doing kettlebells for ages, and then I just did some press-ups and I just felt way stronger. I did some pull-ups, I felt way stronger. I couldn't believe it without training those movements. And Pavel says it's the what the heck effect with the kettlebell. And I think what the kettlebell does is it takes the slack out. Mm-hmm. It's pulling you at the maximum expression. So it helps you to train without the slack in the system. I think we got the one video I definitely recommend is from StrongFit, and he talks about internal and external torque, and I think he's got a towel in that or something that he's ringing. So if you search StrongFit internal torque, it's like a 7-minute video, and that really helps explain it with visual cues as well. I'd recommend people check that.
I think on that as well, it's like I watched that for the first time and it went completely over my head. Mm-hmm. And then if you watch, he does a lot of breakdowns of how to do different exercises, and when he's talking about them, he's talking about them all in terms of internal external torque. So if you watch that and then go away and start watching some of the exercise videos and following along, like the sandbag squat, and he does one on side delt and rear delt flies, and then for me it started clicking, and then I revisited the internal external torque video the other day and I was like, oh, I get it now. So yeah, it's good.
It's one of them, isn't it, that you just have to keep coming back to. But I hope if this is the first time you've heard about this stuff, that you're able to sort of keep up and last until now, and that you got something from this episode, really, because I know it's when you're new to it can be quite a lot. But trust that you're listening for a reason, and that you're onto some resources that can hopefully help you either fix your injuries or to be stronger, be a better athlete, be a healthier, more functional human. That's really what we're about. We're not looking for stuff. No cheat codes or anything. It's like this real honest stuff that works for all humans, because we've all designed in a very similar way. Mm-hmm. But yeah, where can people check us out? Where are you at?
So my website is www.apenutrition.co.uk, and then on Instagram is ape_nutrition.
Nice. And we just made a Rediscover Human Instagram, didn't we?
Yeah.
So you can tag us or follow us on that at Rediscover Human. And then my one is humantimothy.co.uk, and at the Way of the Rope on Instagram is where I'm active a lot at the moment. So if you want to get a rope, you're interested in the ropes, check out Way of the Rope on Instagram, or you can get them on humantimothy.co.uk.
Last thing from me, if anyone's interested in picking up any CBD, MCT, keto
discount
bars,
code for them,
yeah, I've got a discount code for listeners to the podcast. It's Rediscovering Human.
Rediscovering.
Yeah.
Okay, make sure you don't forget the ing.
The ing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate you coming in. It's always fun for us to do, and the views it's nice to get, like, we're getting about 1,000 views almost on Instagram on some of the videos, and that's great because we know everyone here is really about it, and it's the start of something exciting, and we'll see how the next year unfolds. But yeah, you're in the right place.
Yep.
Much
cool.
love.
Thanks.
Peace.